Welcome to Ploughman's Backyard. My name is Kendra and it's another beautiful day on the homestead. Today we're going to be talking about perennial priorities. When you first buy a homestead or you're first starting out planting your perennial gardens, what is it that is priority and what isn't? A lot of people tend to go towards the fruit trees. Why? Because everybody wants to have apples, pears, plums, and peaches right on the homestead, and that is a great thing. Those are really great things to do. As you can see behind me, we've got some apple trees. We've got lots of fruit trees going on here. This one here was probably planted about 8 years ago, and we're getting probably, I'd say this is our good second year of harvesting apples off of this tree. This one here has been planted about 7 years ago, and it is on its second year of good harvest as well. But that's not really what we're going to be talking about. Even though these are great things to have on the homestead, I'm going to tell you exactly what is the first things you should put on your homestead that are going to give you fruit right away. Even though planting fruit trees is a really great thing for your homestead, and I do highly recommend it, it's not the first thing I would recommend planting. Planting fruit trees like this, for one, you're going to be waiting about 5 to 7 years of waiting for your first fruits on those plants. When you're starting a homestead today, you're wanting to have benefits right away. And those are, one, your small fruits, two, definitely your asparagus, and if you're into rhubarb, that's another third that I would definitely, something that you would want to have on your homestead right away. So the reason why I recommend small fruits, asparagus, and rhubarb right away is because when you plant them, you're typically getting a harvest within 1 to 2 or 3 years of planting those things. Another reason why I suggest it, one, it doesn't take up a lot of space. So fruit trees need a lot of space between them. When you're doing some fruit bushes or small fruits, they take up very little space, and you can put a lot of them in a small area. They're lower in cost than a fruit tree. When we did ours, we actually could buy them in bulk at the time. I'm not sure if you still can. You might have to look where you can get those. Like when we planted our raspberries in the back here about 7 years ago, we planted 250 canes. I'm not necessarily going to want to go and spend about, $20, $25 on a raspberry bush from the local nursery, but definitely if you can buy it in bulk, I would recommend it. The same with our asparagus. We actually planted about 200 to 300 crowns of asparagus the first year. The other thing is really, before you purchase your fruit trees and your small fruits and things like that, knowing your zone. So here we're about a zone 4, but oftentimes we can get a really harsh winter that puts us into about a zone 3. So now when I go and buy and purchase my plants, especially the fruit trees that we want to have around for a long time and your small fruits, we always go a little extra on the cooler section. So we always go for about a zone 2 and a zone 3, just to be sure that our plants can survive those harsh winters when we do get them. The other thing is the soil condition. Certain plants, such as cherries, they love to have a well-drained soil. So knowing where to put your small bushes or your fruit trees is also really important. So we put ours up a little bit up on a hill, and they seem to be thriving there. But then the raspberries, they don't really need that. They don't mind having a little extra water. So we put them in a lower portion of our property, and they're growing exceptionally well there. The other thing is knowing if they like full sun or part shade. That's another indication of where you're going to put your perennial bushes or trees. So planning all of that out before you purchase your things, because then you really know how much you can plant in that area. The other really important thing is too, when you are purchasing your small fruits, your bushes, things like that, or your trees, I would highly recommend a minimum of purchasing 3. Now some things are self-pollinating, so you can still get fruit with only having 1. And what that does, the more that these bushes and things have other pollinators around it that are like each other, the higher your yield is going to be. So even though something is self-pollinating, it will pollinate itself, but you're going to get a lower yield. And the more plants you have around, the more opportunities that the pollinators have to help them pollinate, the larger that your harvest is going to be. So now that we're talking about small fruits and the things that I highly recommend growing right away when you get your homestead, for one, your rhubarb, you can actually get your harvest right away if you plant it early enough in the spring. The one thing that I do recommend, if you are growing rhubarb anyways, you do have to be cautious of how much you're actually taking of the rhubarb. You only want to take a certain percentage of the rhubarb so it continues to grow back. That being said, I'm not a huge rhubarb fan, but we have a big patch of rhubarb here, and no matter what, I have tried to dig it out and it just doesn't die. It is one thing that you can always count on growing back year to year. The second thing is asparagus. So if you're starting asparagus from seed, it'll take about 3 years to get your first yield, maybe even a little bit longer. We plant it from crowns, so we got our yield earlier. That being said, even though I planted crowns and we had, I'd say the first year we actually had some asparagus come up, I didn't pick them. Why? Because if I left mine about 2 to 3 years just to grow up and go to seed, grow up and go to seed. And what that does, it establishes that crown, and it actually, you get a higher yield in the second and third year. So like anything else, like especially if you're buying fruit trees and things, people always want to buy the fruit trees that have fruit, like apples on them. That is like a no-no. And the same thing goes with when you're planting your crowns and things like that. Even though that is so tempting for one to want an apple tree with an apple on it, or two, to pick your asparagus the first year you planted, I would always recommend, one, leaving the asparagus, not to touch it, because you're going to benefit from years to come later if you don't. And two, if you're picking an apple tree that has apples on it at the store, I would definitely not pick that one, or just make sure that you're taking that off and removing any of the flowers, just so that the energy can go into growing that tree out. Because if the plant itself is putting all of its energy into putting fruit and flowers out, then the energy is not going to the roots as well, and it's not really going to be well established. So in order to have things well established, like I said with the asparagus, leaving them a little extra longer helps you benefit in the long run from years to come, to be able to harvest those things for many years. The next thing is small fruits, one of my favorite topics to talk about. I love it. So we planted our raspberries in 2016, and we continually get a fantastic harvest off of them. I would say yearly we are getting about 40 to 50 jars of jam just out of our raspberry patch that we pick here. It's absolutely phenomenal. You plant them the first year. I want to say into your second year, you're getting a little bit of a harvest, but the third year you're getting a very high yield of raspberries. I highly recommend, if that's one small fruit you can start off with, planting your raspberries. We planted Nova red raspberries, which do fantastic every year. We also planted Anne, the yellow raspberry, as well as Eden. It's a red raspberry. The Nova always outbeats them 100%, but it is nice to have a little bit of a variety. If you love blueberries, I would recommend planting blueberries. They do take a little bit longer than raspberries to get a decent abundance in fruit, and I really do recommend getting the high bush berries. They're a little bit more cold hardy, especially for our climate, but I just love the high bush berries. Recommend doing blueberries because you can get a really high yield off of your blueberry bushes if they're doing well. And the next thing that is really close to blueberries, if you haven't heard of it, some people call it honeyberries. We call it haskaps. They are really close to a blueberry. We have planted them, and we planted our blueberries, I want to say it was about 5 years ago. We get a little bit of blueberries here and there. The plants themselves are really growing. They're not fully mature yet, but we planted our haskaps about the same time, maybe they might even be looking into their 4th year, but we have been harvesting off of them for the last 2 to 3 years, and they bear fruit way earlier than a blueberry. So you're going to be harvesting your haskaps, like even I would say a month before your blueberries are even ready to be harvested. That being said, I do really like the haskap or the honeyberry, but it doesn't take the place of the blueberry. So the haskaps grow like 10 times faster than the blueberry bushes. They get big, bushy, and they yield a whole lot of berries. Compared to the blueberries, they're a little bit slower going until they get established. The haskaps are an interesting mix. They kind of resemble a blueberry and kind of resemble a raspberry. I know that kind of sounds odd, but they have kind of the same skin and color of a blueberry, but inside it's very seedy like a raspberry. So having a good variety and mix of small fruits, I really encourage that as well. The next thing is the currants. They are probably one of the fastest fastest growing small bush plants that we have here. And they gave fruit within 2 to 3 years as well. They get so heavy with fruit that the plants actually almost fall to the ground. They're so heavy with fruit. You may not be into currants, but it is one thing that is going to give you a very high yield of fruit within a matter of 2 to 3 years max. The next thing that I really think should be planted is grapes. I find it took us about 3 years to get a decent harvest from our grapevines, and into the 4th year we were getting an abundance. So if you have the space and the location to put them, I would definitely recommend getting at least, like I said, a minimum of 3 grapevines. I do recommend those. One of my favorite varieties is a Somerset grape. It is most like a table grape. Now these are smaller than what you would get at the store, but once they ripen up, they are really tasty, almost like a little candy when you come out and pick them. But we have multiple different grape varieties here. The last thing that we have here that is a small fruit is our sour cherries. I have a video talking about that. They're not necessarily super sour, but they're not super sweet either. These cherry bushes can grow anywhere from like 8 to 10, maybe even 12 feet tall. They are phenomenal. I want to say they probably took the bit on the longer side. Maybe we were getting a little bit of cherries our 3rd year, tiny little bit in the 4th year. This year we have had abundance of cherries. I can't even believe it. And they have thrived where we put them. Again, it's just a really nice treat. They are actually a little bit later than the haskap, but much earlier than the blueberries and raspberries. So basically once spring comes up, the first thing that we are harvesting is the rhubarb and then the asparagus. And then it goes into the haskaps and the sour cherries and the raspberries and the blueberries. Each week or each month there tends to be like a different thing that we're harvesting, which is a really great thing if you can do a multiple amount of things. Now here on our homestead, we have about 1.2 acres, and I'm going to tell you that we are not utilizing even half of that for our garden space. Small fruits and things like that don't take up a lot of space. We probably have about 15, maybe 17 fruit trees growing on our property, and I want to say 3 of them right now we are harvesting off of them. We have apples on them, we have pears, we have some plums, but we are benefiting more. I'm going to say we have outdone ourselves in the small fruit category in asparagus compared to our fruit trees. So I would say that if it's your first year homesteading, or if you're looking at, okay, what should we do within our first year? What is the perennial priorities? It is definitely putting your effort into the small fruits. So, because in the waiting time that has taken us about 7 or 8 years to get our apples, basically about 5 years we've been harvesting our haskaps, our blueberries, our raspberries, and our asparagus every year in abundance. So while we're waiting for these to go, we are actually benefiting from the small fruits that we planted. The first year I would definitely do the small fruits and asparagus. The very next year, if you can, if you're able, I would then go the 2nd year planting the fruit trees, just so that you do have them coming into the future as well, because they do definitely benefit the homestead and they are around for generations. But if you're looking at where to put your money and where to put your time, small fruits and asparagus is the way to go. If you've enjoyed this video, please check out our other videos on gardening. I've got lots of other stuff that you might find helpful within your first years of homesteading, or maybe even some questions that you have. We have lots of great stuff around here, so don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you know when new videos come out, and continue to correspond. I want to know what you're growing at your place, what you found successful, and I want to know some questions you might have that maybe I can help you. We've been here, I want to say, about 8-9 years now, and we have a little bit of experience that we'd love to share with you what we've learned along the way. So thanks for watching, and until next time, we'll see you on the next video.